Hello, welcome to AI in Action. My name is Maurie, and I'm here with my husband Jim, and we are going to spend Sunday evening talking about artificial intelligence. Actually, we had several big companies like Google and OpenAI introduce some new AI tools this week.
I showed you some of them.
Yes,
I did. I even violated the rule.
you did violate the rule. You came in there and woke me up.
Early morning.
And we could spend a lot of time talking about those new releases, but there's a lot to them. So I don't think that we could cover everything in a half hour.
Not and cover all the other stuff that I wanted to cover this week. So we might have to push that out to next week. It's not like the tools are going away.
Generative AI is not going anywhere.
So
large corporations, governments, they're committed. They're fully committed to Gen AI. And I saw something on LinkedIn the other day, somebody who had posted something about how it's going away. We need to stop using it. And I'm like, look, I don't know what rock you're living under, but this is not going anywhere. So
was that the lady you were talking about that wanted it to go away? Or is that somebody saying it's going to go away?
They were both. They were saying, we don't need to teach it because it's going to go away.
Well, I think they also didn't want to teach it because they think it's the devil incarnate and you should never use that because you're going to ruin kids completely, which is kind of where all of this started today. It started as one of my usual rants. It's kind of that engineering side of me. The engineering side of me says there's a practical thing that's happening. You deal with what you have and you make the best of what you have. Engineers take what there is and they adapt it. They create things from it. You don't sit in denial and say, well, the best thing I can do is pretend like that doesn't exist. And there's just so much money in the whole artificial intelligence, and it is incredibly useful. And where it is today versus when I started 2.5 years ago when they first released ChatGPT, what I showed you, those new tools this week, it's incredible.
So I'm going to bring up one new tool that you did show me that was not the ones that everybody's necessarily talking about. Our youngest son is in college and he just completed a hardware class. And I know that he came in and he was studying for a final and you and him were working together and y'all were trying to use some AI to do some explanations and it just wasn't working out well.
I even told you that AI does not do circuits very well.
You were like, it doesn't do it. And then I'm in the kitchen and you come in the back door and you're so excited and you're like, you got to come see this. And I'm like, oh, okay, no, you got to come now. I'm like, all right, fine. And so you took me out to your little office and you pulled your phone up and you had on your whiteboard
a circuit. It was one of the problems.
I recognized a circuit because I've been around you long enough that I know what that kind of looks like.
That is a circuit. You know that.
Yeah, I knew that was a circuit.
Yes.
So you took your phone and you put it on Google.
This was the new Google release. This was the new Google release.
And you had it look at your whiteboard and you had a conversation with it, an interactive conversation with it, with your video feed running live.
Yes.
And you guys, as in you and the other guy being the AI, solved the problem.
We did. I mean, I didn't get deep enough into it to see how well it would have done because this was a fairly complex circuit and you're doing some very complex math. So I don't know how well it did, but as a tutor, I wouldn't have needed it to really solve the complex math wasn't generally the problem on these kind of circuits.
You just were asking it, is this the right formula?
Generally, the problem is the setup. You get everything set up. And that's what it was helping me do, make sure I had the right formulas, make sure I understood some parts of it. It acted like a tutor.
It was amazing.
It was amazing.
I was sitting here thinking, my goodness, the stuff that I could do in a classroom with 22 kids and I'm the only teacher in there, the stuff that I can help those kids with the ability of AI sitting there with me is amazing. And so that kind of brings me to the point that's like my pet peeve is that AI integration is a done deal. It's there. It's not going away. And so we have a responsibility as adults to help future generations understand it, understand how to utilize it, understand the ethics and the responsibility and when to and when not to use it. That is our job.
No, we could do the same thing we did with social media and video game stuff.
So we could just throw it out there and see what happens?
I call those a dumpster fire because social media to me is a dumpster fire. It's a generational dumpster fire because if you think about it, I mean, we're guilty of that kind of thing when you think about it because our kids were growing up when with the World Wide Web, social media, video games, online video gaming. I mean, video games have been around longer, but the online gaming, all that stuff was really coming to fruition. And we didn't like what we saw.
But we gave in.
So, which we'll talk about a little bit more about that in a minute. But we had a difficult time trying to figure out what exactly it is we're supposed to do with this. All this stuff, all these platforms that kind of got thrown at the kids, and all the thing that comes with it got thrown at the kids.
You mean like social media and everything when that happened?
That's what I'm talking about. All that social media, all the gaming, all this stuff. I mean, because remember, I mean, in the gaming, for example, we had, our oldest, Jacob, had a friend that was bragging about how he had met this person he was talking to all the time in another state. And we're sitting there going, do you know this person? I mean, you're 14 years old.
Yeah, safety.
This could be an adult in another state that's a pervert. How do you know what? So we were struggling with what we do with that stuff, and it was coming really fast.
Yeah, and I remember our youngest one, we never let him have a gaming console at the house. We were like, okay, if we have one, it's going to be in the living room. We're going to be able to see what you're doing when you're doing it, because we had learned our lesson with our oldest one, who really started getting into the video gaming, and it started affecting him and grades and his focus and everything else, which thankfully as an adult, he didn't know how to figured it out.
He didn't have the training to know how to compartmentalize.
He doesn't have you don't have the brain power at that age. You don't have
the experience
to compartmentalize like that. And so with our youngest one, we started seeing that there was a lot of things that were going on in his social group that he was not a part of, because we were the only ones that were saying, no, you need to go out. You need to do things outside. We need to do some activities.
And he did do things.
He did all of that.
But then he would go to the movies and no one would show up.
And no one would show up.
Because he invited them through a more physical means, but then they got together online and they had a gaming party, which he didn't know about. And they didn't invite him because they knew he wasn't really allowed to play video games that much anyway.
Right. So why invite him?
So there was a social inclusion piece of it that he missed out on.
So we were talking at University of Texas on Friday, and this kind of came up. We actually talked about gamification and social media with AI. And one of the things that I said was, it's a lot easier said than done, because I was that parent back, that always said that I wasn't going to let vision babysit my kids. I was going to be the parent that was always involved. And then all of a sudden, as I like to say, you're up to your ass in alligators and you are tired and you turn the television on. But the difference.
I'll tell you what the difference is, just to go back up what you just said. We didn't turn the television on, and they didn't want to watch television anyway. That was the problem. We were all prepared mentally for this idea that we're not going to let them watch TV all the time. They didn't want to watch TV all the time. What did they want to do? They wanted to be on social media. They wanted to play video games.
Well, even when they were younger, like before gaming came out.
Jacob wanted to play video games in the 5th grade.
Well, that's true. But I would put on something on the television, and it had a set ending. It came to a conclusion. The show that they were watching, the 30-minute show, something on PBS or something.
You want to sing the Barney song for us?
I still have nightmares about the Barney song.
PTSD when it comes on?
But they would put it on, or even a Disney movie. They would watch the movie and the movie ends. And I think that's the difference on a fundamental level. That's the difference between a movie or a cartoon versus social media or gaming, stuff like that, because it ends and your brain goes, it's done. Now I do something else.
Or when you're dating your boyfriend who's into gaming back then, games were these big boxes.
Star Wars.
What limited those? Quarters.
The amount of money you had in your
We
pocket.
even talked about making Jacob's video game console. And I'm not knocking games. I'm not knocking social media. What I'm knocking is the idea that you can just ignore it. Because that's why they became a dumpster fire. That's why you've got a whole generation that grew up not really knowing well how to do it. So I think the easiest thing to do is say, just don't do that, right? You just tell the parents, just don't do that, right?
No, that's not how that works.
Well, that's not what I hear, because there's our headline right there. Read our headline for us.
14 celebrities who limit their children's screen time and tech use.
Now, I highlighted a few for you because I thought you'd find these amusing.
When you first told me about this headline that you wanted to cover, I was like, the hypocrisy in some of this is ridiculous. I mean, you have some very, very famous people that have come out. It's in Business Insider, and they say that they limit their kids' screen time.
It's a parent's responsibility, they say. Now, you got a couple here. I admire Bill Gates and Melinda Gates. They've done some great things. Their children were not allowed to have phones until they were 14. Well, that sounds good. You made billions of dollars on gaming consoles, dude. I mean, it's really, you're rich. You
Mark
can limit that.
Zuckerberg.
Yeah, there's another one. I
He's
like
a
that.
big one. He restricts his young daughter's screen time, but allows them to use video chat to connect with family.
Well, if
the guy invented social media, basically.
and if it's bad for your own daughters, why don't you have better controls in it to keep people off of it?
We don't even need to talk about that one because it's kind of like what you said when we were talking about it. Need you say more? I mean, it's like if you invent it, it reminds me of the Erin Brockovich show from a long time ago.
I know, I love that part.
Where she's got all the people from the company that were polluting the water.
Claiming that they weren't.
That claimed that they weren't polluting the water. And she gave them glasses of water. And the first guy goes to grab the glass of water and she goes, by the way, that's from one of the wells that you are in the town that you're, and he didn't drink the water. And that's when they knew they had lost the lawsuit.
They had to settle. $300 million they had to settle.
Drink their own water, drink your own Kool-Aid.
Guess what? He's not either. But one of my favorites, though, she didn't invent any of it. I was kind of fond of this one because this is a 1%er thing. Angelina Jolie hired cybersecurity experts to protect her children from online dangers. I got a call into her. She hadn't called me back because I want to get a reference on that cybersecurity person because I need to hire one of those as well. Well, actually, I don't because my kids are grown now.
How much does she pay this person? I mean, do they walk around with the kid? Is that what they're doing? It's like a cybersecurity expert.
And the kid says, I need to post. I need to post. So they take their phone and the cyber person follows them around and posts for them. I also thought the hypocrisy was there for Susan. I can't pronounce her last name, but she's the
YouTube CEO.
And how many times have we seen kids doom scrolling through video after video after video after video?
The death scroll
is that what it's called?
Jared calls it when you're doing the death.
So when you look at these, there's other wealthy people. There's 14 of them on this list, which I left on there. But I thought those were highlighted because these same people made money on what they're claiming was bad. So as you said earlier, have you ever tried to tell your kids they can't get on social media or video games? Because that's what we did.
Yeah, it's horrible.
How did that work out for us?
I was an AP. I can name 4 or 5 kids on my campus that would start having behavior issues at about 10 o'clock in the morning, like severe behavior issues. Mm-hmm. And the only thing they wanted was for me to call somebody to come pick them up.
They even told you that.
Yes, they wanted to go home. And I'm like, okay, but you've got recess and you've got PE and you're going to go to music today and we've got art, and let's get excited about this. One kid in particular, I want to go home. Well, what are you going to do when you get at home? I'm going to play my video game. That he wanted to go home to play his video game.
But that's not an addiction, I'm told.
So pitch fits.
Again,
have complete meltdowns.
We're not here to knock those things. What we're here to talk about is, should we teach kids, or should we use the old Darwinistic approach, survival of the fittest, or should we teach them about AI? If you make the assumption, if my statement is true that AI is not going away, and AI is going to have a profound impact on how people learn and how they interact with technology and information, well, isn't that the same thing we had with social media and online video games? They had a profound impact on how people interacted with technology, but the training, the digital literacy that was given
wasn't given in the schools.
It wasn't given enough.
Well, and we just you're right. It happened so fast that the education system wasn't really prepared for it, and the parents didn't understand the impact. So while you could say it's a parenting problem, let the parents handle it, a parent cannot keep up with, at least not all of them, unless you're a 1%er who can hire a cybersecurity expert.
That's what I was going to do. I wish I would have done that when my kids were younger. We could have person following them around.
Taking care of it, yeah.
Because, working for a school district, we have the money, right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
It's pocket change.
Pocket change.
So the educational system needs to step up and start offering additional literacy education about artificial intelligence to students
Well, to
and
some
to parents.
each one of these technologies we've talked about have their own unique problems. Video games are very addictive because they give you this adrenaline fix and all that stuff. Social media is similar in addiction, but it also has some other very negative side effects on self-image and all this other stuff. So teaching your kids how to survive in a social media world versus video game, it's a different skill set. There's some overlap, but it's a different skill set. So my argument is that every single animal on the planet teaches their kids how to survive in the world, right? I mean, dogs, cats, hippos, they all teach their kids. For example, the other day I'm looking outside and our cat's out there and it looked like it was about to attack one of the deer out there. And I'm sitting there going, Kitty, that's a bad idea. That's a thing a parent would say, that deer's going to stomp all over you.
Would you notice the larger deer kind of walked over to where the cat was
Kind of looked
the
at it.
smaller one, and the larger one's like, I don't think so. And the cat's like, oh, maybe that's not a good idea.
Yeah. So, mom and dads, parents, whatever you want to call them, have been teaching kids this for a long time. Same thing. We have the same responsibility. What worries me about AI is not the big stuff. And we hear people all the time, well, let's just block it. Well, first of all, we can't. We've already decided that's really impossible because it's integrated into everything. The thing that worries me about AI is not the big stuff, but the subtle stuff. The stuff that even if a parent decided that they're going to talk to the kids or help educate their kids about artificial intelligence, which like I've been doing even with my fully grown kids, it's the subtle stuff that's hard, especially when you grow up in a world where everything online has this real feel to it. So one of the things that I noticed, which is kind of what kicked off on this whole discussion, was I had an article in Education Week that I wanted to maybe include in the podcast. So I was going to get a summary of it. And I was kind of asking questions because it was long and I was being lazy. So I used Perplexity at that particular moment. And I said, summarize this. Well, it kind of did and it kind of didn't. And then I had OpenAI do the same thing. And I looked at it and I went, wait a minute, because I actually read a good chunk of that article. I just wanted the summary with
So
that.
you knew the gist of the
knew the
article
gist of it.
yourself.
And I knew what they were telling me was somewhat accurate, but not quite. It wasn't a hallucination in the sense that they didn't make up anything, but they didn't use the article as the context. They used what they already knew as the context because most likely Education Week, the people who own that particular thing, probably don't allow AI
to
scrape. So the AI finally said to the AI, because I know that, I said, are you making this, you're pulling this from your own knowledge or are you pulling it from the context I gave you? And that's the answer that it gave me. It goes, well, I'm actually pulling it from my own because I can't use that as a source. But I knew to ask. That's my point. So do you call that an hallucination? Well, a hallucination in most cases means it just makes stuff up. What it told me was technically accurate in the context. When you read the headline and you looked at what it said, it was reasonable. I don't think it made it up. But at the same time, it wasn't what I asked it to do.
So here's a perfect example of why it's so important that you do teach the subtleties, like you were just saying.
Yes.
There was a student that has been accused of cheating using artificial intelligence in a college. And he was like second semester freshman. Okay. Mm-hmm. He's from a small town who they didn't have any AI at all whatsoever, no training, no nothing, mm-hmm. Probably very little computer science even.
Remember in our last conference, there was people talking about how they were trying to block it.
But they didn't have any of that. And he was using Google to get some sources to research
which
some
is
stuff.
Reasonable.
And he used some of the sources in a paper that he had done, and the sources that he used were not correct. They were not valid
because
sources.
They were generative AI sources, not Google actually finding the source.
He had not even gone to ChatGPT. He doesn't have any paid for versions of any AIs out there. He was just using the search engine that everyone has
been using
access
for 20
to
years.
now. And it had the little top part pops up and it tells you it's generative. That he didn't know what generative was. And so he literally is fighting with the college right now because they accused him of plagiarism or of not utilizing valid sources for a paper. And it's because of the lack of education.
Whether or not he's completely as innocent as he likes to claim, you don't know. But I do know that if he would have known with the proper training, he would have also known to vet those sources. Because at the end of the day, whether he made the mistake intentionally or out of sheer ignorance, either way, he didn't know better. Because you could, in many cases, when you use these generative AI tools as a search tool, because that's built into OpenAI now, you can say to it, only give me sources that are verified.
Yes.
And it does a pretty decent job of it. I did want to add one little extra point into the fact that I thought it was kind of amusing. I'm seeing a lot of these sites that have decided everything they do is absolutely valuable enough to be sold nowadays. And I think it's kind of interesting because if you're old enough to remember it, in the 80s, there was not a single piece of information you could get unless you went to a library that was free. If you wanted to get a book,
I remember being back and looking in the catalogs and going through all the stuff.
That's the only way you could find it. And the
when I was in college,
libraries,
I did that.
exactly. But if you wanted current news, you bought a newspaper.
Right.
If you wanted to you could listen to stuff on the radio, but you had to listen to ads. Everything had a cost. And the World Wide Web came along and everybody got used to this idea that they're going to get information for free. And the newspapers and everything at first resisted, but then they went ahead and said, okay, it's fine, and put a lot of them out of business, but they found a way to monetize it through the advertising, the Google ads and all that other stuff. Generative AI comes along and now they're going, no, we made this mistake before. So they've started siloing everything to where the generative AI tools are getting hamstrung. Well, that's good for them because they're monetizing it. Mm-hmm. That's good for the people doing the OpenAI and all that stuff. What it's bad for is the little guys, because OpenAI is not going to pay one of these small, neighborhood newspapers for their information, which means as the generative AI gets more and more prevalent, you're not going to be able to find them at all because it's not going to come up at all. And that kind of worries me a little bit. Maybe it'll make people buy newspapers again. I don't have any idea.
So one of the things, you were just talking about that, about the cost. That's another reason why I think it's so important that this education comes from our educational institutes. Mm-hmm. Because we can't afford a cybersecurity person for our kid, but we can afford to give our kids the tools that we think they need to make them successful, like the paid for models, and give them stuff that is behind the paywalls and give them access to Wolfram Alpha and stuff like that. A lot of kids, the parents cannot afford any of that.
Or they wouldn't. Maybe the parents won't prioritize it, and they should and they don't. Maybe the parents have a different set of I'm not saying every parent is perfectly innocent of not providing the educational tools. Some of them can't provide it. It's like a function of groceries versus that.
100% agree with that.
And then, but some of them are, who cares? You don't need that stuff. When I was a kid, I used pencil and paper and an eraser and it worked fine. So some of it's attitude, some of it's just lack of funding. And lack of funding is a big problem nowadays, considering how many people we're seeing that can't even afford to eat.
Correct. So those educational institutes need to provide some of those tools so that the kids know what they're going to be seeing and what they're going to be talking about and what they're going to be utilizing when they get out into the workforce and when they get into college or into trade school. So AI literacy, digital AI literacy, we're working on something right now. We're working on an AI literacy boot camp that we're going to try to get out there this summer. Yes. So through AI Ed Pro.
I kind of wanted to review the points here of how we got here.
Okay.
So first point, let's look at historically. First, we have all the kids that we allowed to get hooked on entertainment systems, social media, video games. They're specifically designed in a way that really does kind of kill your ability to ingest information. I mean, we see this all the time in a contemplative manner, and people are making billions of dollars on this. Then we tell the parents that they should either hire a cybersecurity expert that follows them around or just say no. So the kids literally have no idea what everybody's talking about at school, which is what we saw, because that just say no is really your only option because you can't hire somebody to follow you around unless you're rich. So they don't, as we said, they don't get to participate in the stuff. So parents, like we were, go, okay, we're going to have to let them have access because we're cutting our kids off from the world. So we're not, the 1%ers are saying, you've got to do this to be a good parent. but at the same time, they're making money on it, which is hypocritical beyond belief. But let's say you do cut your kid off. Well, one of the examples I saw was Prince William's kid. Okay. Well, you know what? People are going to invite Prince William's kid, even if
he doesn't play the video games.
Even if he's not part of the crew, they're still going to invite him to their parties because he's Prince William's kid. Though they said Prince William's kid got cut off from gaming. I bet you somewhere in the
He's got contraband.
He's got contraband down in one of the old dungeons in the castle. He's going to sneak down and play his bootleg games.
That, or he's going to be like one of those people who go to like an all-girls Catholic school, and when they finally do get out of the situation they're in,
go crazy.
They go a little crazy.
And so when you look at how we got here, and now you say AI, are we going to let them have no training again? Are we really going to do this? Are we going to make this same mistake and make these? Because all these billionaires, they're going to keep throwing fuel on the dumpster fire because they make billions doing it. So maybe those billionaires could donate some money, because part of the problem we have at schools is we don't have any money at these schools, and they keep wanting to privatize schools and all that other stuff, which makes it even harder because now the kids with money can afford to go to the nicer schools and so on and so forth. So I know that's a bit of a rant.
Well, it's okay to rant occasionally because it's like we're seeing history repeating itself over and over and over. And it's to the point where basically we're repeating ourselves just so we can be the old person sitting there lecturing the young people about how, well, when I was younger, my generation, we didn't do it that way. We had to like walk uphill both ways in the snow to get to school. We've heard it before.
Of course, we heard it from our parents.
And so we're letting them down. We really are letting them down. There's some fun facts you put in here.
I wanted you to read the fun facts before we run out of time.
This is really interesting to me. In 2024, the revenue from the worldwide gaming market was estimated at almost, ready? $455 billion US dollars.
It's almost $500 billion.
With the mobile gaming market generating an estimated $98.7 billion. So we cannot win this battle.
Not if AI gets as big. Social media?
It's used by 64.3% of the total world's population on an average of 2 hours and 23 minutes a day. I think that average is probably low. And I think that average, there might be getting that from just social media sites. If it comes to just like your phone and how often you're on your phone.
Yeah. Oh, that's definitely.
Your email,
this is just social
text
media.
messaging and all that stuff.
Yeah.
You can ramp up those hours quite a bit. So this is just from social media.
And look how much money
sites.
it's generating.
And it generates $250 billion per year, and it's growing at a rate of 15% per year.
So how do you win against that? You don't. And the same thing with AI is generated. They're saying now it's generated $1 trillion in wealth.
Yeah.
So
the person who had posted the article, actually it was a friend of mine who reposted an article that someone, I don't know who they are, they signed it as Emily. I'm assuming they just want to stay anonymous. They were the ones that were saying, we cannot teach it. There's no place in the classroom for artificial intelligence.
We just need to ignore it.
We need to ignore it.
We'll call that the ostrich technique.
Yeah. You can't just ignore it.
It's not going to go away. So what is our solution? We've said it about 10 times in this podcast. We'll say it again.
It's our opinion that until the day comes when all adults decide they aren't going to make billions hooking our kids on stuff or our adults on things so that we can keep paying that money and keep paying that money, the only way you can help our kids, our society, not just kids, is through education.
Well, and we're not saying parents don't have a responsibility to step up. They do. Parents
don't necessarily have the time to educate themselves as to how to educate their kids.
Well,
I think we should have parent outreach programs also.
It should be a partnership too. And how do you have a partnership? Well, you could stop villainizing teachers and support your teachers. Go to the school board meetings, volunteer, be involved. AI is a scary tool. It's an incredible tool. People keep saying it's going to change how we interact with technology across every piece of technology we have. That tends to be true. Or I think that's true. And with all the dollars going into it, it's probably going to be true.
Well, just the changes that it's already 100% changed the way that I interact with technology.
So what is my favorite saying about this?
There is a great movie. It's a Disney movie called Tomorrowland. And in the movie, they talk about which wolf are you feeding? And so
The idea is that if you've got something that's not what you want and something that what is what you want, which wolf do you feed? The one you pay attention to or the one you give the most energy to is the one that's going to thrive.
yes,
And if you want the positive between, the educational system and the parents and all that other stuff, then we've got to stop kind of fighting each other. And I think there's been so many conversations, we say this over and over again, that have started because of AI, privacy, this addiction thing that we talked about with social media and video games that could all very well, AI could make you mentally lazy because you let it doing all the thinking for you, teaching kids that you can use these tools, but here's the limitations and boundaries. Here's where it can be a tool, not a crutch. I mean, all of these things should be considered. And the place to kind of funnel all that through, I think, is education.
I agree. 100%. And not just because I was an educator. I am an educator.
I was going to say, what do you mean was? You still are. Your paycheck says you're still an educator.
So we are out of time for this week. I would like to say thank you very much for listening. And we hope you guys have a marvelous rest of the week.